All right, I hope you're all excited for this next session because I sure am. To give this next keynote is Tushar Bhatia, Senior Product Manager at Atlassian, who's going to talk about improving SaaS onboarding experience for higher retention. Can we please have Tushar on the stage?
Hey everyone.
Hey Tushar,
Hope you
how's
can
it
hear me.
going? We can hear you great.
Good.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much for joining us. I'm going to leave the introduction and everything to you. I don't want to spoil your session. So take it away. And then once you're done, I'll come back on and we can have a little bit of question and answer with the audience. That sounds cool?
Yeah, sounds awesome.
All right. Take it away, Tushar.
Awesome. Cool. So let's get started. So today what I'm going to talk about is 7 things I knew when I started working on onboarding. So before I get in, just a quick introduction, a bit about me. So my name is Tushar and I'm a product manager at Atlassian. So I've been working here for around about 3 years and been working on onboarding for close to 2. Super exciting space, and I hope you guys find this useful. Before that, I was working on monetization as well at Atlassian on the growth team, and before that, I was working in Southeast Asia in a company called Bukalapak, so in Indonesia. I had a lot of fun there, and I was leading the growth teams there, and before also working at Freelancer, running some growth teams there as well. I got into product management. Super passionate about it, about building products. Started off as an engineer, but I really quickly realized that I love building stuff, and building stuff isn't just that. It's also about the whole marketing and so many other aspects of building an awesome product. So that's why I fell into product management. But anyway, we're here to talk about onboarding. So let's get stuck into it. Just want to set some context. There's a couple of things that you should probably know about this talk that to make sure that you all find it useful. So the first thing is this stuff is all specific to products that try to leverage a flywheel model or product-led model. I'll get into what that is in case anyone hasn't heard about that in the next slide. But it's most applicable for those kinds of products, B2B SaaS or SaaS products as well. So the other thing is typically I talk to a lot of startups, and I get every now and then some startup founders that are pre-product market fit, and they're really curious about onboarding. The general advice here is that onboarding is really a way, and you'll hear more about this when I talk about flywheels and stuff, but you hear more, it's really much more of a way to scale up. And if you're pre-product market fit, then the best thing to do is talk to each customer and actually onboard them individually so you learn a lot. And when you're post-product market fit and you're trying to scale is probably the best time to introduce onboarding. But even then, probably a useful talk, hopefully, when you go post-product market fit. The next thing is, I'm not going to share any magic bullets. I don't have any, otherwise I would share them. So we're going to be talking on the principles level here, and you'll hopefully take some of these learnings and figure out how to apply them to your own product. Lastly, I've been working on this for over 2 years. There's been many Atlassian teams that have also tried to work on this as well. We're still learning, and it's just super exciting every year we start working on this again. We see so much more opportunity. So we're also on a learning journey, and we like every day is day one for us on this. And yeah, super exciting. So next, I just want to share why I'm so excited about onboarding and why it's such a big deal, especially for a product-led organization or a company, a flywheel company like Atlassian is. So before we get into that, what is a flywheel? What I mean is you're basically using your product to grow your business. You're able to attract new customers because you're solving important problems. And naturally, you get a lot of customers that are trying to come to your product, and you're able to acquire them in a scalable way. So things like paid ads or naturally content and SEO, things like that, you're able to acquire customers scalably. And once you attract them, you're able to engage them. That means that they're able to find value, understand your product, and then actually make the purchase themselves. Even if they're like a multi-thousand people organization, they can actually make the purchase themselves without even a salesperson. And that's what kind of really starts the flywheel process as well. And then you delight those customers. So they're able to buy your product, they understand it, they like it, and then you make them fans, right? That's when you start delighting them. And then what happens is they start referring other customers, new customers, and then that's when the flywheel starts. So what you'll find is a lot of people actually take our products to the next company they work at. So that's really how Jira Software spreads around a lot of companies. And that's kind of really what kicks off the flywheel. So onboarding actually plays a really important part in this, and that's why it's so important if you're trying to build a product-led or flywheel type organization, a product. It's basically making sure that customers can understand your product and get value out of it without even needing any one-to-one help. And that's why it's so important. That's why onboarding is so important for a flywheel type model. Cool. So let's jump into the lessons then that I've learned. So the first one, and this is kind of a general good thing to do as a PM, but it's especially important and probably a little bit harder to do for an onboarding team, and that is really understanding your customers. The reason it's a bit harder for an onboarding team to do versus another product team is typically another product team might be in the product, and I'm generalizing here. But other product teams are typically inside the product, and they have their own segments, and they have very specific customers that they're kind of solving problems for. But most of the time when you're working on an onboarding team, the interesting thing is that actually all your customers will go through onboarding unless you actively make a decision to not let them go through onboarding, or you skip onboarding for those customers. So that means you're actually considering every customer that goes through your business. And when you have a complex SaaS product, that actually gets really complex on its own. So what we did was, because there's so many different types of customers and to think about, this is really simple, but it works. And this is how we approach it. So we worked with our research teams. We did a lot of research on our own. We did a lot of experiments and we spoke to customers. But really what it came down to was we defined a bunch of archetypes, and we aligned with our stakeholder, our partner teams on those archetypes. And then we leveraged this framework called the Jobs to Be Done framework. I won't get into it too much because you can probably Google that, but basically really understanding for each archetype, what are they trying to accomplish, right? And not even thinking about just what they're trying to accomplish in the product, but for each archetype, really understanding what's their role outside of the product. What are they trying to do in their jobs? What do they need to get done? And then infusing that with what they need to get done in the product. So that's super interesting. And then we start with that. Once you've defined that, then you can start prioritizing based on your strategy, which archetypes you really want to focus on, which ones should you skip. And that gives you a more clear way to think, about all these different types of customers that are coming into your product, which can usually be quite overwhelming. So another thing with onboarding around understanding your customers, it's kind of hard, is without feedback loops in onboarding experience, it's actually pretty hard to get feedback on onboarding. Why is that? Well, one, most customers actually forget about onboarding. So if you go for a customer interview and you ask them how their onboarding experience is, 9 times out of 10, probably more than that, they probably just forgot about it. They don't even know what you're talking about. And the other thing is, it's always really good to talk to customers that don't like what you're building or have dropped off for whatever reason. And it's extremely hard during onboarding to kind of find those customers because they just stop using the product. So what we try to do is we try to create these feedback loops. And this is actually started by one of our engineers during our Ship It. So every year or every quarter we have a Ship It time where you can kind of work on whatever you want. And one of the engineers kind of worked on this, and he created a feedback loop in some of our onboarding experiences. And we've been getting direct onboarding feedback, and it's been super helpful. Some people love it, some people don't, but it's super helpful. And we get to actually go and interview customers based on the ones that actually remember this and provide feedback. Yeah, so super great. And it's actually connected to our Slack room. So whenever someone provides feedback, is a cool idea. You can send that feedback straight to your product team so that you can actually go on and respond to that customer as well, to close the loop with the customer as well, so that they know you're listening to them. Second lesson is focus on time to value, right? So I kind of think about this in two different ways. So now, I mean, before we get into this actually, so now you're at a stage where you know your customer and you've got all that. So the next thing to do is to really think about, okay, how are you going to drive value for those customers? And I like to think about it in two ways, right? So especially for onboarding, and so that is, what do customers need to do before they can actually get value? So that's typically, we're talking about setup stuff. And then the second part is, what do they actually need to know about your product before they can get value, right? So with the first one, like I said, it's typically setup stuff. So as an example, what we found was in Jira, the most important thing that drove activation, and the most important thing before customers could get any value is actually obviously creating their first project inside the product. And everything else didn't matter as much, didn't really affect activation. But as soon as we started running experiments to simplify that particular process and prioritizing that particular process, we were able to drive up activation rates and also consequently retention just by simplifying that, getting people into the product as soon as possible, focusing on only the important parts of the setup and excluding the other ones, able to actually really drive retention through that actually. And yeah, just as simple as possible is important. Yeah. The next one is, what do they need to know before they can get value? So this is really interesting because I think a lot of people, when they think about onboarding, you think about orientation onboarding. So that typically is stuff like, hey, where's the menu bar, or where do you get this to do this? And that's kind of what we call orientation onboarding. And mostly customers actually don't really find that helpful. That's the stuff that they skip. What they want to know is, are there any mental models that they need to have before they can understand how to use your product? So for us, it's like explain to customers, hey, what's an issue and how does that actually relate to my real work? How does this product actually relate to what I'm trying to do at work? So that's been a key thing for us, and that's what we focus on even more than the orientation onboarding. Cool. Third one is choosing your metrics wisely. So, I mean, for this context, I mean, there's a lot of different types of metrics, but just for this context, I'm talking about two different types. And the first one is, what's your team North Star metric for your onboarding team? And then you have initiative level metrics, right? So the lesson really here is, don't let initiative level metrics become your onboarding team's North Star. So, what do I mean by that? I think a common example, and I've seen this happen to a couple of onboarding teams in other companies as well, where people have heard this example from Facebook. It's a very famous one. Facebook had this growth team, and they had, and they found out that, I don't know, 7 users, or after they invited 7 users, they achieved viral growth, and that became successful activation. And then people hear about that and they think that, hey, that's what we should do for our onboarding team. Let's find that. What's that magic number, right? But actually, if you do that, you kind of focus on you'll get local maximas, and you're not really focusing on, you're not actually going to be actually solving problems that help build your flywheel. And that's kind of, if you take a step back, those are the kinds of things that you really want to focus on. So what do I mean by all this? Like just some examples, right? So on the left, you have some team level metrics. On the right, you've got some initiative level metrics. And on the left are kind of the metrics that we actually focus the entire team on, and that's activation and retention, right? So to be honest, we don't actually look. We definitely look at activation, but retention is, if I had to pick one metric, new customer retention is how we kind of measure the success of our onboarding team, not any particular metric like 7 invites or anything like that. Right, because there's so many things that could influence that, and retention really is the thing that will push our flywheel forward. And so that's what our team focuses on. We still look at these individual metrics on an initiative level, like when we run our experiments or we're making any changes, we definitely look at a lot of different metrics. Also look at a lot of qualitative feedback, but at a top level, what's our team's mission? It's really to improve that retention number. Cool. So number 4, onboarding doesn't start after sign up. So another common thing that I've seen as well is that typically you have companies that kind of split their onboarding teams, and they have their marketing team at the top, and then they have their in-product teams, and they kind of have this divider line. But really, when you're running an onboarding team, what you quickly realize is you have very little information about a brand new customer, unless you actually think about what's happening at the top of the funnel. There's so much useful information that's happening there. And so, we spoke, one of the first things was understanding your customer. You need to also not only understand them from like a strategy point of view, but when you're personalizing experiences and building experiences with your customers, you need a scalable way to actually understand who they are. And one of the ways to do that is really thinking about it from the top of the funnel, and understanding why people are coming is really important. Such a rich top of the funnel is such a rich source of information. It's how you understand why and how you can really get them to value as soon as possible. So to be honest, I really thank my past experience at Bukola Park as well. It's such a common pattern in e-commerce. E-commerce companies typically have product teams that actually look at the top of the funnel and go into product, and they really start optimizing from the top of the funnel into product and get customers to value as soon as possible. Something that's really emerging in B2B, but that link, you don't really see that link as much as e-commerce, but there's a lot that you can learn from other products in e-commerce and try to apply them to B2B SaaS. So the other thing is, I think, I've kind of given it away in some of my other things that I've been talking about, but really onboarding is actually cross-team sport. So an onboarding team really can't exist in isolation. Firstly, if you're an onboarding team, you need to build up product knowledge, especially if you've got a complex product, something like Jira software. You need to really understand the product, and the only way you can do that is to actually talk to the other product teams because they're the ones building the features, and so you need to build that relationship and build that knowledge inside your team as well. So you have to think about that too, if you want to set your team up for success as well internally. The second thing is, you don't want to start using onboarding tours as a band-aid to over a crappy experience. Sometimes that's a reality, you have to do that, but that's not what you want to do. So you want to build these really good relationships so you can influence other teams to make experiences easier to understand, specifically for your new customers. And to be honest, it's a win-win situation, because a better experience is and an easier experience to understand will hopefully benefit all their customers too. But we have this saying in our team that no onboarding is the best onboarding, and we're trying to find ways to improve the product instead of actually adding tours and things like that. And lastly, it's also try to leverage existing experiences that are already there. An example of that was what we were talking about with leveraging existing information from marketing and working with marketing teams really closely. Sixth, I guess this is kind of obvious, but first impressions really matter. These kinds of things really affect your activation rates. But a good question to ask yourself and workshop this with your team is what's your golden path? This is a screenshot that one of our designers actually took of our product, and this is something that a new customer might potentially could have seen before in onboarding, right? In their first couple of days. So what we're doing is we're actually actively making sure that new customers don't see a lot of these change boarding messages, and we're reducing the amount of trying not to bombard new customers with such messages, so that they can actually focus on what's important, and really focus on understanding the product. So thinking about that golden path, doing things like this is really important and so we actually treat our new customer segment as almost like a protected segment, that if you can't actually now send a message without making sure that it doesn't get sent to new customers or getting them reviewed by our onboarding team. So the seventh one, I think this is also another one that's just generally good across all for all PMs anyway. But don't fall for the shiny things. But I think we're especially susceptible to this if you're building an onboarding product, because people will go try another product internally. They'll try another product and say, "Hey, this is really shiny. This is cool. Let's why don't we have this in our onboarding experience, right? Because it looks cool and it looks like it's helping customers. But really, just you need to have that same product discipline as you would have in any other product team or any growth team, and really make sure you're focusing on problems that customers actually have, and not trying to build these cool experiences like these cool tours, and really think about that flywheel, because that is where onboarding teams really have the biggest lever for. And just to caveat with that, I don't mean don't look at other teams, and but I mean get ideas from them, learn from them, but always build what your product and your customers need. Just something that I've seen a lot of onboarding teams fall into the trap of, and something we have too. Cool. So just to quickly recap. So the first one is understanding your customers. Second one is focusing on time to value. Third is choosing your metrics wisely. And then fourth is onboarding doesn't start after sign up. Fifth is onboarding is a cross-team sport. And then sixth is first impressions matter. And seventh is don't fall for the shiny things. So thank you so much. And I hope you found that helpful. I'll pass it back. And I think time for questions.
All right, thank you so much for that. That was a very interesting session. Now, we do have a few questions already in the bank. So what say we get into them right now?
Sounds good.
All right, so our first question here is from Adrian Go. Adrian, thanks so much for writing in. He asks, will the onboarding focus and strategy differ for the different pricing models? For example, freemium versus pay as you go.
Yeah, that's a great question. Like if I were to answer that generally, to be honest, it really depends on your product. The general approach that you'll see us taking though, and a lot of other B2B SaaS companies taking is we like to open the gates as much as possible, right? And once you open the gates, the majority of your customers actually start in freemium. So for onboarding, it typically makes sense for an onboarding team to kind of focus on the freemium customers first, and really make sure they understand that, because that's kind of what's starting your flywheel. And over time, we don't want to pressure our customers to purchase. We only want them to purchase. We give them a couple of months. When they're ready. And so we have different teams kind of focusing on the monetization, and that happens later. So to be honest, that's not even a consideration. The upgrades and focusing on premium customers is not something that our team actually focuses on. But yeah.
All right, thank you, Tushar.
But it really, again, it really depends on your product and your model.
Right. So it's a very like it depends kind of question. So
yeah, but the general trend
Adrian,
is people are opening it up. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Adrian, I hope that answers your question. Next question we have is any consideration to implement gamification into the onboarding process?
To be honest, we have considered it. It's something that our product teams are always looking at. But honestly, we have a lot of things to fix, and we're working on a lot of other things that are our personal backlog of things to do before we get there. But yeah, something we've looked at. I don't have much more to add to that.
All right. Well, another question we have here is, do you have any benchmark product that inspires you to build the onboarding process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always look at, I don't have a single product. I'm always downloading a lot of apps and trying them out. And so, I mean, the first is obviously look at competitors. The other thing is, I really like looking at apps from different categories. I honestly look at it just a bunch of different apps. I don't have one particular one. Sorry, but that's my general approach. Is I try a lot. I try a lot. Yeah.
Right. Well, maybe what are some of the apps that you look at recently that recently has piqued your interest?
Recently, I think I've been looking mainly at other Atlassian competitors recently, most recently. I think, yeah, I'd say most of our competitors is what I've been looking at.
Right. Always keeping abreast of what they're doing, so to make sure that you stay competitive and everything, right?
Yeah, I actually another thing that I was kind of talking about this before is yeah, because I'm really focused on that that marketing stuff and making sure that the top to the in product really hums. So generally e-commerce apps is something that I've been looking at a lot, and Amazon would be one. Not necessarily for their onboarding in particular, but there's a lot of other things like in terms of their experience and what they do that is kind of interesting.
Right, of course. Okay, so we got another question here from Sigit Ario, who asks, what are the things that need to be considered to approach/onboarding process for a SaaS B2B product?
That is a big question. I don't know how to answer that one. What are the things that need to be considered? Well, there's a lot. I think I mean I hope that I kind of covered some of that in the talk. Yeah, I wonder if there's anything more specific to add to that, or any more detail to that question.
Well, maybe let's wait for Sigit to maybe ask a follow-up, and in the meantime, let's move to this other question, because it is a very general question. So let's move on to this other question: churn versus successfully onboarded users. Which one gives you the most valuable insight when doing the research for onboarding, and why?
Yeah. So for us, like in terms of the North Star that we look at, it's retention. The most important thing is that we're continuously improving new customer retention. The reason for that is if you're gradually improving new customer retention, I mean you're reducing churn as well at the same time. So definitely definitely we look at retention the most. I guess that's kind of looking at churn. And the reason for that is kind of like I mentioned before. It's if you improve retention, reduce churn, that increases your chances of a multiplier effect on your flywheel, makes your flywheel spin faster. So you retain more customers, there's a higher chance that they will be more satisfied because they're still using your product. When they're more satisfied, they will, refer other people, and then you spin your flywheel further. So definitely retention is, that's why our team is focused on retention.
Right. Okay, so we have one more question here from Bessie Wu. Is there any best practice or process for onboarding a new feature or product?
Best practice, if I could sum it up, I think it is one, make sure that you keep it as simple as possible. And simple as possible means just focus on, for B2B SaaS, it's like, what do they need to do? Like just to set up the product, the bare minimum. So, I don't know, if you're using Google Drive, then it might be making sure that they have an integration or something like that they absolutely need, right? Or if you're doing Slack, then it's like making sure that the team is there. Otherwise, the product's absolutely useless. And just focusing on that, and making sure that is as simple as possible. But then it's like getting them into the actual product and understanding why this product is way better than everything else. So just like focusing on those two things. And then the other thing is, this is also partly what I meant by don't fall into fancy things like shiny things. Like it's less. I think it's less important in terms of how you onboard. It's more about what you're onboarding to, because how you onboard can really be experimented and stuff. But I think that what you onboard them into is like a strategic decision that you also need to experiment with. But I think generally that's how I'd approach it.
All right. I hope that answers your question, Bessie. We got another question here. Tushar, you got a lot of questions, which I think is great. So Neha Joshi asks, do you think customer dropout rate is proportional to the amount of data you require from them? And is this true in all cases?
That's a good question. Yeah, so it is. So generally, yes. But we've actually launched experiences where it hasn't been the case. And it's not been so. An example of that is, it's been in the setup process where if we get customers to set something up for the product and they understand that they need to set that thing up so that they get more value out of the product and we're making it easy for them, then we don't get as much drop off. But in general, you will get drop off. Yeah, but if it's something that customers understand that is important and adding value to them, then that is something that you'll typically get less drop off on. But in general, yeah, it is something that you'll get more drop off when you add more screens. Also, yeah, that's why I say it's extremely important to focus on only what you need. That's why I kind of put that in bold. Yeah, because we've had a lot of wins by just removing screens. Some of the biggest wins we've had is just removing stuff, and it's been pretty interesting.
Yeah, like keep it simple, right? So that it's a smoother process. It flows much better, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Another question we have here. Many companies have a cold start problem. That is, they start the user in an empty state where the product doesn't work until the user does something. So what do you think about this?
I actually bought the book Cold Start Problem, but I haven't read it. So probably not the best person to answer this. But like in general, I think that it is obviously something that you need to address, right? If that is how your product works. And that's what I mean by you have that setup process. So like for B2B SaaS, it's typically two things. It's usually integrations, and then the setup of the actual product. And then the third thing is making sure you have a team around. Because a lot of B2B SaaS, obviously you're working with your team. So those are typically the three things that you have to focus on. And the general best practice for important things is to kind of force people to do those things before you give them full access to the product. But just you got to be careful with that, and make sure you do it on only the things that they absolutely need. It's because you want to be helping them. But yeah. Got to read that book, by the way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I have that book as well, and I've yet to start on it as well. So I guess we both have
Yeah, I
homework
have a
after
huge
the
list
session.
of books
So
that I need to read. Yeah.
yeah. Next question here. It's another asking for your thought on a statement. So, if your design requires education, it's a bad design. What's your POV based on your experience?
Um, yeah, I tend to agree. Um, yeah, which is why, as an onboarding team, you want to start influencing other product teams to start fixing things. In reality, though, when you are, trying to build this product and kind of trying to get your flywheel to work, um, you do need to make sure that you have a solution today, because some of these design fixes to actually fix them can take and to do it properly, when you're serving enterprise customers, thousands, tens of thousands big, can take years, really. So yeah, you want to make sure that you're solving their immediate problem first as well. So it's kind of like a reality thing as well. So it's something that we're constantly balancing in our team. It's a question that we talk about a lot, actually. Should we fix this or should we onboard them into something? But the other thing is, onboarding is not just for that, and that's just one part of onboarding. But the other part is things like helping customers build a mental model. For with us at least, like the mental model is, hey, this is how I work in real life. How do I bring that into this product, right? So that's the mental model, and that's what's more useful onboarding in general. Yeah, but yeah, I
Right.
mean, fixing it is the best thing to do if you can.
Right. Right. So like really putting yourself in your user's shoes and seeing, like which one makes the most sense for the problem that they're trying to solve at that point in time.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. One more question here from Mary. Any tips in building a seamless offline to online onboarding experience for users who aren't tech savvy?
Yeah, I've left Bukala Park, so I don't know what they're doing now, but Bukala Park does a lot of that. I would look to what they're doing now. And but yeah, very interesting space. I actually wasn't working on that stuff myself, over there. Yeah,
Right.
I can't add too much.
Right. So basically, your top tip is to just really look at those who are doing a good job of that, and just mimicry is the best form of flattery, right?
Yeah, I mean, you do your research and you figure it out. I just I know it's a very complex space. I wasn't directly involved, so I don't want to give anyone the wrong answer. And yeah, but it's a very interesting space. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I think we got one more question. I think we got space for one more question here. Let me
Cool.
just see. Um, Wait. No, I think we're good. Yeah, I think that's all
Good.
the questions. We've answered pretty much all the
Awesome.
questions.
Got
Thank you
through
so
them.
much, Tushar. Yeah. So
Thanks. I hope that was
for
helpful.
anyone who wants to reach you or anyone who wants to continue this conversation offline, where would you recommend they reach you at?
Reach me on LinkedIn, so Tushar Bhatia on LinkedIn, or yeah, send me an email to tbhatia@atlassian.com.
All right. So that's Tushar. Thank you so much, Tushar, once again, and thank you to the Atlassian team, of course, and thank you to all of you who asked all these questions for this very engaging session. Up next, we do have a fireside chat about Slack's design process and strategy. So make sure you tune in for that. I'll catch you there.